I'm Jerry Sherk,
I am Ed White.
living near San Diego, California. Today we're going to talk about how to overcome obstacles to become your best self. And just wanted to start with talking a little bit about the relationship that Ed and I have with each other. And so I'm on the left in this picture. This is at a football camp, or near a football camp we did in Shiprock, New Mexico a few years ago. And we took a little field trip during a break and walked up to the very spiritual place on the Navajo reservation, Shiprock. So Ed and I have worked with a lot of youth programs. Ed and I actually, we played against each other in the NFL. And we found when we retired, and Ed lives close to San Diego, that we had so much in common when we started talking. So real quickly, the things that we had in common is that there's a lot of teachers in our family. Both our dads were plasters. We got in shape for football before the season, helping our dads. We were both wrestlers in college. We were both second round draft choice in the NFL. We both had very long careers in the NFL that were productive. We both started helping kids in retirement, helping youth in our retirement, and we both leaned towards the arts. So Ed is a very accomplished artist, and I was a professional photographer for about 10 years. Anything to add, Eduardo?
Well, just that our relationship goes back to our playing days. We played against each other, and we became such good friends. We would wait for each other after the game to say hello before we got on the buses and headed out. And so after every time we had an opportunity to play each other, which wasn't a whole lot, we had a chance to visit. And then so subsequently, as Jerry mentioned, over the years, we've part of our giving back in our nature has been to do different projects together, and we really enjoy that. It's just part of our what we are and who we are.
Great. And so I'm going to move to the next slide here. Oops. There we go. And Ed, you want to talk a little bit about your career?
Well, I was born and raised in San Diego, and we moved out to the desert with my dad's, as Jerry said, construction and plaster and so on, and went to Indio High School. From there, I went to the University of California at Berkeley and played football, was drafted by the Vikings, played for 8 years with Minnesota, and then had the opportunity to make a move, so I pressed it and ended up back home in San Diego, which was wonderful because my mom and dad and my family got to be a part of my football. And so I enjoyed that. And then we've just made San Diego our home. We've lived up in the mountains in Julian for years, and we just now moved down to the city. And, you know, Jerry and I have, I figured it out, a total of almost 150 years of experience to share with you. And we're coaches of different types. I coached professionally for 6 years and then college for 9 years. So, and I've been a coach ever since. So we're both coaches, and we love to share and pass on information. And that's exactly what we plan on hopefully accomplishing today.
And although we have almost 150 combined years on the earth and 29 years in the NFL, we're still trying to figure it out, right?
Oh, I figured it out. We're not getting out of here alive, buddy.
Okay, and then so on to me. I attended Oklahoma State University. I was a wrestler and a football player, also second round draft choice. Ended up playing 12 years in the NFL, whereas when I went to the NFL, I wasn't sure I was going to make it. Was once the defensive player of the year. Had the sack record for some time. Was named a Cleveland Browns legend. After football, I was a photographer, and then I actually went into psychology, got a master's in psychology, studied athletic transition, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And I'm having problems finding the chat box. So,
We lost your screen.
oh. So let me see here. I hear you that you guys have lost the screen.
I can see you.
Oh, you can?
I can.
Okay.
Yeah, we can see you, but the PowerPoint you were showing is gone.
Okay, so a little technical problem. So let me back up here. I may have to log out and log back on. So Ed, do a little tap dance while I log out and log back in.
Well, I could call my grandson, who's 13. He could probably figure this out for us.
He's already got it figured out.
Yeah.
We'll save your place.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go. LSU, huh?
Hell yeah. Go
All
Tigers. Number one, thank
Well,
you.
I played with one of the doggone it, what they call the band, the linebackers. Roy Winston was God dang it.
Chinese
Roy-
Bandit.
The
Chinese Bandit.
Chinese bandits. I played with one of the Chinese bandits. Roy
Wow.
Winston. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. He's still alive in Baton Rouge. He's got dementia, but he's doing all right.
Gets to meet new people every day, huh?
Yeah, there you go. If you're on the earth long enough.
Bless him. Bless him.
Yeah.
Chinese Bandits were, that was Paul Dietzel.
Yeah.
He had the team in 3 different teams. It was white, yellow, white, gold, and bandits.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just the linebackers, though. It was the defense, I think.
Oh, it was the defense. All right.
I think. It might
It
have
probably
been,
was.
or it might have been the linebackers and the safeties, like secondary. But they were bandits because they'd roam and pick and grab the
Yeah.
ball.
Well, we called Roy Mooney. That was his nickname.
Hmm.
And he would, we'd go out squirrel hunting, and he'd make a squirrel gumbo for the team, for the Vikings. Yeah, we had a great time. Yeah, he was a good one.
You must have
Yeah.
played at a very high level if you played with somebody like that. Good for you.
Well, yeah, we had played on some good teams with a lot of good guys. But yeah, he was one of my favorites.
Uh-oh. I'm looking at a slide.
I am too, but I see you in the corner. What's that?
We're back.
Yeah.
Hey.
Okay. So the topics today, we're going to just touch on the stresses brought on by the COVID crisis. Ed is going to talk about a favorite philosophy of his called falling upward. And I'm going to talk about overcoming obstacles, and the obstacle is the way. We'll talk a little bit about the athlete's journey and how to use the COVID crisis to expand your horizons and express yourself and to be of service of others. So on the screen, I won't read them all, but these are some of the losses caused by COVID for athletes. Thinking back at the time I was an athlete, I would be kind of freaked out right now if I felt like I was losing an entire year or possibly even more of my athletic lifespan. But some of the other things that people are feeling out there, and probably a lot more. And so, Ed, can you please jump in there and talk about Father Richard Rohr and falling upward?
Father Richard Rohr is a Jesuit priest who is a psychologist and had a prison ministry for a long time. And Jerry and I both are sort of disciples of Father Rohr. I guess you could say that. But he talks about one premise, which is falling upward, and it's what happens in life when you fall and think you're at the bottom, and the rebound is oftentimes greater than the fall itself. For me, the biggest event, and probably the most tragic and most stunning event in my life, was the loss of my daughter in an accident a week after she was graduating from high school. And it was horrific. And yet over the years, even though it's a painful loss and and we think about her all the time and talk about her, and she's, you know, spiritually with us. We have gained a lot in terms of, you know, just feeling her in a different way, the enlightenment in our life that she has given us, and just the thought that we're going to be together again and enjoy what we have right now. And so that was an event that in my life marks falling upward in the greatest sense. Other things would be, I, you know, had a contract dispute with the Vikings, and you know, had a great career there. We were in 4 Super Bowls and just so many positive things, but it just didn't work out with me. I had some issues with contract, which oftentimes happens, and so I got traded. But I fell upward because I got traded to my hometown where I grew up, and my mom and dad got to be a part of my football career, and there were just so many positive things that resulted in the bounce back and the falling upward process. So there's just it happens all the time, but I think, and Jerry's going to talk about it, the depth of things that happen in our life that we overcome and come back even stronger. Is that enough, Jerry, or do you want to keep expounding?
That is enough, and I thank you for that.
You're
So,
welcome.
yeah, I wanted to talk about the obstacles and actually practicing psychology and counseling and through mentoring for 25, 30 years now. And it just seems to me that every time I think that life has come along to slap me, it actually then becomes the gift. And it's happened in athletics, it's happened in relationships, it's happened in careers. And a couple of years ago, I started reading a little bit about Stoic philosophy, and I'm a big fan. One of the primary Stoics is Marcus Aurelius, a really good Roman emperor. And what he said was, what ultimately becomes the way. And I really believe that. And recently, I read a book called The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday, and he's written a lot of different books on Stoicism. And so, really, to me, our greatest weaknesses, losses, and injuries can transform into our greatest strengths. And so, for me, you know, one example is when I started to become a football player in the NFL. Is my name is placed there. Yeah, are you finding a good spot for your iPad? He's back. Oh, now you're on mute. Oh, I think they probably muted you, so they'll unmute you.
How's that?
Yeah. So one of my examples is when I went in the NFL, one thing I was really embarrassed about was my 40-yard dash. I won't even tell you now to this day how slow I was. I was very quick.
How slow? Tell me how slow.
I'm not going to.
Were you 5 flat?
I was very quick going for
Very
10
quick.
yards, but for 40 yards, I was really slow, and I tried everything. In the off season, I worked with track coaches, and I was out there on the track running like a sprinter. And every time I get back into training camp, it was the same time. And so what I realized a couple years later, that I'd worked so hard at overcoming my 40-yard dash that it picked up my game in every single other area. And one was attitude. So I knew that I was a bit slower, and I was always telling myself, I'm not going to be the one that's going to pull up, and the ball carrier is never going to wiggle out of a pile and run by me, because I am going to just keep going. Another one was I compensated by just getting in incredible shape, a better shape than my teammates, better shape, I believe, than most of my opponents, and also by becoming a student of the game, of developing a system and picking up keys and really studying them. So I've had, had to overcome that. It actually made me the player that I was, and I had other losses, many losses, even during my career. And one was a relationship. I got married, and near the end of my career, I got injured, and at the same time, my life or my wife left me, and my life left me too. At the time, I thought my life was over, and it actually allowed me to have the life that I needed to be living, to find the woman I needed to find, and to have the kids with her that I have now. And also just, going to the injuries. I know almost all athletes have injuries. And so I was maybe headed for a Hall of Fame career. In about my 8th year, I was playing in Green Bay, and in preseason, and a big guard kind of crunched me in the knee, laid down on my knee, and my ligaments were torn, and I was out for most of the year, and then I kind of limped through the rest of my career. But that injury, what it caused was, one was I started doing photography. I picked up the camera, and a little bit later I'll show you a couple shots. I became a professional photographer. And then after my career, it actually led me, the injury and the exit from football is, something that we all feel as athletes, because we all have to at some point leave our sport. I became a counselor and focused on actually trying to develop a model for athletic transition. So through my 70 plus years of life, I really believe my weaknesses, losses, and injuries have become a great boon to me. And one of my heroes in psychology is he's called the father of group counseling, Dr. Irvin Yalom. He says only the wounded healer can truly heal. So it's really the wounds that help us to build empathy. And there may even be some clinicians online now. And I know that most of the psychologists and psychiatrists and social workers and therapists have had their own wounds in life. And that's the reason for them to get into the business and learn how to heal themselves and to heal others. And so we also wanted to talk about expanding your horizons. So for me, it was photography. For Ed, it's been art. And Ed, can you talk a little bit about your artwork, please?
Well, I've always been an artist. As a young boy, I was an artist. When I went to college, I studied and have a degree in landscape architecture. So I did that. I had a landscape construction company. And then I decided I enjoyed teaching and coaching. So I stayed in football, and all along I was an artist doing my art. Landscape architecture, it was the art of using plant materials, the colors, the textures, the size and shapes in the landscape, and that was artistic. But I've been a sculptor and a painter. I've done the John Madden. I did the Madden for years, and now I do the Hall of Fame pieces for all the colleges in San Diego State, the University of San Diego, and a bunch of other places anyway. And then I do my artwork, and I love teaching others how to paint. So Jerry and I have combined our efforts, and a lot of times we'll go out and go to schools and at various places. We've done we did retirement, a group of people down in Borrego, down in the desert out here, and that was cool. And we've done single fathers in Calexico in the desert, and we've done young unmarried mothers up in LA, and we've done drug court kids out in San Diego, and we just enjoy doing that and sharing that. And I had a group up at the Wolf Preserve in Julian, where I lived for 35 years, and they're bringing back the Mexican gray wolf. And so I had a group up there, and we had a chance to share, and they were terrific. And so that's where my art is. And these two paintings here, I did that painting on my left was a painting that represents.
So Ed, you're cutting out a bit. So till you come back, I'll talk about them. The painting on the left, Ed did. It's about human trafficking, and I believe he sold it and gave the donations to folks that are working with young people that are involved in human trafficking. Are you back? Somehow you're on mute.
Am I back on?
You're back now.
Okay. No, I just took it off of mute.
I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. So anyway, I heard you say it was to support the efforts to support the efforts to stop human trafficking and worldwide. And then the other was my first game. And I was playing against Bob Lilly, who was, one of Jerry's, his era and Jerry's talent, very good player. And it was just my representation, my buddy Joe Cap. That was his last year, my first year. And there's Lilly getting ready to knock him silly. And anyway, that was a painting. The two ravens down in the
Oh, you're frozen again, so I'll talk till you get back. So this is actually a class that Ed and I did in El Centro. And Ed, you look like you're back. Oop, but you're frozen again. We did this class with young people in El Centro through a group called Imperial Valley Regional Occupational Program. And Ed does a class, he's big on Native American culture, and he teaches the young people how to paint their individual shield. And it can be very healing, especially for young people that have experienced a lot of trauma. And so maybe we can come back. Ed is getting set up again. As I said, I went to photography, and I actually picked up a camera when I had a devastating knee injury in about 1977. And I started talking to photographers that were covering the team that came into the locker room, and I asked them about equipment and so forth. So this is about a year later, and actually the team is on the field, and this is me. My camera is actually on a stool. You can see it over to the right side, and I hadn't planned this, but the mirror shows a split right down my personality, and it's kind of where I was feeling at the time, because I could see the future for me was to exit the game, and because of my bad knee, and that at this time we were at training camp at Kent State University, and the team was on the field at the very same time. And so I actually became a professional photographer. I think that athletes need multiple ways to express themselves. I'm fully aware that to become the best athlete, you need to become basically a warrior. And it is a war, and that's how you look at it. And those that are able to treat it like a war and have full focus are the folks that are really successful. But then it also makes you, I believe, one-dimensional. So this is me. It's either my last year or two of playing, just when I got out of the NFL. If nothing else, I'll have to say I was probably one of the best cut photographers. I had a pretty good physique for a photographer. And then I actually got good enough to do some magazine work for the NFL. I went back to training camp. This was a rookie, Paul Farron, who came in the training room early in the morning. And I just thought, if somebody sits down there, it's going to be a really good shot. And I was fiddling around with my lens and spread a little Vaseline on the lens. And this guy actually put on 40 pounds and made the team. So again, it was just a way to create some memories too. So this is a Monday night game. I like this photo actually because it's got some big time players in it. Number 53 on the left is Bill Cowher, who became a head coach for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Boo. And actually was just named to the Hall of Fame. This is Clay Matthews Sr., who should be in the Hall of Fame, number 57. Charlie Hall, a great linebacker, 59. On the right is Dick Ambrose, who became a judge. And then Marty Schottenheimer, who was our defensive coordinator and then became head coach of the Browns, the Chiefs, and the Chargers, and had a great career. This was a little bit more behind the scenes, ran in one of the NFL's magazines. It was training camp. A couple years after I retired, I went back, and each player has an injury that's really aligned with their position. So on the left, you can see the almost like a prehistoric setup where the defensive lineman is getting his neck stretched, and the next person over is a quarterback who's icing down his arm, and then a wide receiver knee, and a linebacker getting electric stimulus and ice on his hamstrings. And Ed, are you back with us? Somebody probably put you on mute.
Unmute. Okay, how's that?
So let's go back to you want to
Okay.
talk working with kids?
All right. So yeah, so I was talking about we've done several things with youth and talk about we talk about a lot of things. We talk to the Native American youth, and we talk about the symbolism in the Native American culture and the Mother Earth and grandfather and how that affects, and we talk about their life and look at their life and all the components of it based on the 4 directions, and we just kind of apply some of the native terminology and historic relevance to their life currently. So it's been a good program.
Good. So I'll move through mine again. And we wanted to talk a little bit about managing transitions. So for me, I was a photographer for about 7 or 10 years, and then I went back to school to kind of figure myself out, and studied counseling psychology. At the same time, I ran into Dr. Christina Versari, and she was teaching sports psychology, and she told me that there was something called athletic transition, which is a study of athletes going from sports to private life. And so I had a lot of space in my head. As a defensive tackle, I figured out after about 3-4 years, it was left, right, straight ahead, and hopefully backwards. So I still had some neurons to work with. So I thought that I would create a model for athletic transition, because there's some good models there, but to me, they don't really resonate with the athlete and the athlete's life. And so one of the things I started studying, and many of you have probably heard of it, is the hero's journey. And the chief sort of architect of this information and studying the hero's journey was the mythologist Joseph Campbell. And I thought about myself, and I thought about the other athletes I knew. One of the main things about us, male or female, male and female, is that we're the heroes, and that we're kind of lifted up and away from life. And I mentioned earlier that to become a great athlete, you need to become a warrior. And becoming a warrior, you really kind of take yourself out of society because your focus is so intense. So I looked at Campbell's hero's journey, and he actually had it's fairly complicated, about 16 or 18 stages. And I simplified it to the athlete's journey or the hero's journey. But it's really, if anybody studied the hero's journey, it's the story of us all. And what Campbell would say is that you are the hero of your own life. And this model has been used actually by writers, by producers, people that make movies. The first Star Wars, Lucas would tell you that he developed Star Wars off of the hero's journey. And so anything that we're doing in life, so this can represent a career, this can represent what to do during the COVID crisis, this can represent 1 year of performance. So your call is your call to do something. The fear of the call is your hurdles and your obstacles. So for me, my call was to become the best football player I could become. The fear of the call is that those guys they're big, and they look really mean, and they look like they eat raw meat with a little gunpowder sprinkled on it for breakfast. I had mentors who were my coaches. I was really lucky enough, fortunate enough, to have a fellow named Dick Modzelewski who had played in the NFL about 12 years. And he was my coach, and he saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And that's one reason that I started working in youth mentoring, because I had such great mentors. The threshold is the we're not in Kansas anymore moment. Uh, you know, actually the Wizard of Oz is a great sort of replication, or actually has all these stages. And what we do as athletes is we try to go from an ordinary world to a special world. At some point, we have to go around the circle because we're spit out of it and we need to return. But on the way, there's practice, there's tests, which are the contests, and the inner tests. The inner tests can be the skeletons in your closet, or they can be the fears that you have, sometimes the fear of success. And then there's fulfillments, disappointments, and the return. So Ed, we've talked about this quite a bit. Did you want to mention any part of this? You're on mute, but somebody might unmute you here.
Okay, there it is.
There you go.
The transition is traumatic when it comes to pro sports for a number of reasons. Number one is just the income you make playing a pro sport, and all of a sudden the reality is after 10, 15, in my case 17 years, you go out and try to make a living as a landscape architect, and you go, oh my goodness, I'm working for the St. Paul Housing and Redevelopment Authority for $10 an hour now, and that's a bit of a shock. And so there's that part of it. The other part, which is equally difficult, is when you're a player, everybody seems to put you up on a pedestal and, oh, let me get this for you, or let me do that, or you can, oh yeah, I get that, I'll give it to you, or whatever. And there's a lot of adulation and a lot of fluffing that goes along with that. And believe me, you become addicted to that. And so there's that part of it too. And it's a very specific kind of job that doesn't really relate to anything else that you're going to do when you get done other than coaching. So with that being said, unlike Jerry, who had to face the transition just blank, boom, everywhere, where do I go? I had a coach, again, wonderful coaches that I had, but Don Coryell, who was just a special guy, and he wanted me to keep coaching. And so my transition was a lot smoother because I stayed in football, and so I still had a lot of the things that go along with football, less obviously the high salary, but all the other things, traveling with the team, feeling I was a part of the team. And my transition was a lot easier, so it was a lot easier and smoother. And so I think that like my shirt, I wore a Nike shirt for a reason. It says there is no finish line. And really, to me, what it's all about is one transition after another. It never ends. It just starts over, and there's no finish line. You know, it's like one of the comedians said, I'm not afraid of dying. I just don't want to be there when it happens. So there's no finish line.
So true, so true. So we all go through this cycle many times. And my point of trying to delineate it for athletes is that when you finish your career, and you can use this during your career also, but when you finish your career, you can really follow your own footsteps. And the footsteps where you had a call, you had a calling for your sport, a true calling, and you can call it a call to adventure, call to excellence. And then there were fears, the things that you needed to overcome. You had mentors. So whatever you do in the athlete's second journey, you need to find mentors. There's times where you may show up on a job and go, oh my gosh, I really have to perform. So that's going from one world to the next. There are things that you have to do to practice and test, and then you'll have both fulfillments and disappointments. The interesting one and the hardest one for athletes is the return over a career, because then you have to return to a place where you are relatively powerless again, unless somehow you're able to stay in your sport. So the return is very important. Part of the return involves the athletes giving back. So for me, I went through sort of a self-study, and what I figured out was I needed to do actually three things. These things just kind of blasted me after I was looking at this for 2 or 3 years. One is I had to let go, because I would never be a Cleveland Brown running in front of 85,000 people again, getting the cheers, driving my Mercedes, having 20 people ask for autographs in the restaurant. So one was I had to let go. Another was to give back, because really the athlete's life is necessarily, I think, narcissistic. It's mostly about you. I mean, you work with teammates a lot, but it's mostly, the only thing you have control of is you, and you getting better, you getting stronger, you getting faster, you getting a better attitude, all of those things. And so it builds up into the me. And real life isn't like that. I think that we need to figure out ways to sort of dissolve that narcissism in the athlete. And so one way is by reaching out, by giving back to others. And so this time of COVID, it could be constantly connecting with the teammates that you have. Make a point to mentor other athletes that may be less experienced, and look at you like a mentor. Just be a kind person and grow awareness of what's happening in the world. I know that in about my second year, I was actually not drafted in the Army, but I had to go in the National Guard, and I went to active training. And so after being in the NFL, actually it was after my first year, after being in the NFL for a year and just kind of focusing on sports and wrestling and football in college, I didn't know what was going on. So when I came out of that active training in the Army, I started reading about what was going on around me, and read many books for the first time in my life about current events. And then the thing that Ed and I have luckily been able to do and define is to take on a cause that contributes to the greater good. So for me, it's been working with youth mentoring programs and doing trainings for mentors and mentees. And for Ed actually has a nonprofit called Oak Lake Art, and he works teaching young people art. So any thoughts there, Ed?
Unmute. Okay, I think you hit it right on the head.
Okay. Now your hand is over part of your camera there.
Oh, that's the camera. Okay, how's that?
You look like you're swimming in water, but you're okay.
Let me come up.
We can see your nose.
Actually, I'm getting ready to go to sleep. I'm old. You almost put me to bed there. Yeah, no, I think you hit it right on the head. I mean, it's important for us to share our experiences and to pass on. It's about passing on knowledge and things, and it's wonderful. And I think that I have a grandson that's graduating. He was just awarded an award as a scholar athlete, and he's missing his graduation. He had a president of the chapter in San Diego, which gave the awards, the San Diego Sports Association, came up to Julian, and he put on his tuxedo that he's not going to have a chance to wear to graduation, to get this award at his home up in the mountains, and which was really cool. But he's missing out on so much, and yet he's finding a way to enjoy the experience. And again, it's falling upward. It's taken something and making something even better out of it.
Good. Thanks. I actually too, for the hero's journey or the athlete's journey, about 15, 18 years ago, I created a goal setting model. Put it into this PowerPoint, but it's something I've used and written into curriculums for middle school, high schools, and even some community college student workbooks. But I call it the CHAMP model, and I'll show my email a little bit later. Anybody wants to email me, I'll send it to them. And it's especially good working with younger athletes. And so CHAMP is an acronym, and the C is for your challenge or your call to excellence or call to adventure. It's basically your goal. The H is hurdles. What's stopping you from getting there? The A is achievement, which is your visualization, which is so important for athletes. So for me, my visualization part of it was when we're playing the Pittsburgh Steelers and Terry Bradshaw's counting the signals and I'm about 5 feet away from him. You know, my visualization is if I can somehow make it through that line and tackle Terry Bradshaw when he's going back to pass, my life will be golden. So I didn't do that enough. They won four or five Super Bowls, and we have yet to go. But anyway, the A is achievement. The M is for mentors who can help you. And then the P is for plan, looking at all those things. What are the 1, 2, or 3, 4 things that you need to do right now? So I call it the CHAMP model. And it's something that especially young athletes kind of understand and they like figuring out their goals. And so some of the resources, Falling Upward is a book, and there's videos by Richard Rohr online too. The Obstacle is the Way is one book on stoicism and using obstacles as kind of your true north. As you overcome your obstacles, you get stronger. A really good book I read in the past year is The Practicing Stoic. It's a compilation of Stoic philosophy that I love. One of my favorites of all time is Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. And The War of Art, instead of The Art of War, but it's The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. He's got many, many great books. This one in particular is about overcoming resistance. I think one of the things that he says is your resistance is your true north. When you resist something, that's when you know you should be doing it. And so we have our contact information. And I don't know if anybody wants to unmute and ask a question. And like I say, Ed and I certainly don't have all the answers, but we could probably fake it pretty good, couldn't we, Ed? Oop, you're on mute.
We can definitely fake it.
So anybody have any thoughts, comments, questions?
Yeah, thank you guys. I have a question.
Sure.
So you were kind of saying when you guys were, playing professionally football and you were so focused and so sacrificed or, like everything was towards that. So like you didn't really know what was going on with the world. You didn't really know what was going on with social media. And nowadays kids have like their phones glued to them where like they know everything. So what would you tell, I guess, athletes today, I guess kids, high school kids, about like their focus on, I guess, being focused on the sport and academics, but not necessarily focused on, I guess, what friends are doing and everything else that's going on?
Yeah, that's a huge topic, and you're right. When Ed and I were playing, there was no such thing as social medias. Cell phones really, they did not exist. I think it's been a big problem. I've actually looked at some of the studies on how much screen time young people, especially teens, with social media, computer screens, and TV screens. So some recent studies have showed that they're on, and this is excluding homework, like 7 hours a day. And that's for teens. Preteens are on about 5 hours a day. So somebody asked me recently, or they said, you should have a program for getting teens off of like social media. I don't think that program exists. I think the only thing that you can do is to ask them to try to expand their horizons. And to me, social media, there's some good things about it, keeping in touch with people, but there are a lot of bad things. And as we all know, the person that gets left out of the party and all the filters that they put on the pictures that show this is the most magnificent party or place in the world that you didn't get invited to. I would just try to encourage young people to to try to find hobbies and interests maybe, and to go deeply into them if they can, instead of just kind of using social media. But having said that, I know that it's addictive, and there's just no easy answer. How about you, Ed? You're still on mute.
Unmuted. There we go. I know
Right.
the host has to unmute me. I have 3 grandsons that are athletes and students. And, I think a little differently. I think that, I think it's been kind of a blessing through this coronavirus that they are so adept at social media, because it's helped them with their ability to transfer school information. I could never work on a computer, and Jerry's better at it than I am, of course, as we've noticed today. But anyway, they're able to take their courses online and communicate online and social study online. And I think my grandsons are more into the games than the social media, but and I still think they get outside and do all the things we did as young people. I think it's just another dimension to their life that they've developed. And like I said, I don't think we'd have these technical difficulty if we had these 3 youngsters of mine over here working our technical stuff.
Yeah, well, especially during the coronavirus, it's been a boon. And I'm actually next week starting a group mentoring program with some high school students in El Centro. So it's a way to get connected. But I think, especially before the coronavirus, seemed to be even much more of a problem. So thanks.
I think as we get older, we think about how the good things that were for us, and how we used to go out and shoot bow and arrows at each other and throw rocks and things like that, and how great that was. And I think that there's still great things going on for these kids, and I think that their abilities are different than ours in a lot of ways, and yet they're a lot the same. I see a lot of the same things. I see the desire in my grandsons to be good at what they do on the football field, or in the classroom, or on the basketball court. So I think they have those same desires, even though they have developed that other area. So I don't see it quite as bad a thing going on with the media. I see more positive.
Right. And Gene Byrne in the chat says, many coaches have gone to social media to stay in contact with teams, especially at the high school level. And I actually know that to be true, and also the college level too. There's stories in the San Diego papers about Coach Hoke at San Diego State, staying in touch with his team. So it can be a positive.
Well, I was at 73 years old. I was in front of my iPad today doing exercises with the NFL alumni program, and it's fantastic. And I had a workout today, Jerry.
Good. We have just a few more minutes. Any other thoughts or?
Yeah, I've got a question if you guys have time. I wanted to say that I thought one of the most valuable pieces of information was, your model on the hero's journey. I recently retired from fighting professionally and mixed martial arts, and there's nothing that exists to help with that transition before this. What would you guys say is like the biggest factor that helped you make your transition from professional sports to kind of, the real world? And how could that translate to people nowadays that are going from, their professional jobs, but now working remotely, or who have gotten laid off?
Can I answer that?
Sure.
I think that what I did was find the components of my previous life that made me successful. That is things like Jerry mentioned, visualization, and how to utilize that as an artist, visualizing. Very important. Just the dedication to getting in shape and staying in shape, which your rise in the martial art area you had to vigorously work out and be in shape and be focused. And all of those things are keys to how you restart that journey, that hero's journey that, you know, like my shirt says, there's no finish line. You're always going around and starting that journey again. And I think just thinking back on the things that made your last journey a success and incorporate as much of that in your next journey.
I think that's excellent, Ed. And I would add that one is to give yourself a break, because I mean, if you look at the athlete's journey or the hero's journey, the first element on that journey is the calling, and that you can't construct the calling. The calling really has to happen to you. And so sometimes you don't find it right away. So for me, I went into photography. To me, it was a good transition tool. I could stay close to the game or back away from it. And then eventually I went, you know, this is kind of boring to me. I want to find out. I like ideas. I like people. I want to get in the mix. I don't want to just be standing on the sideline with the camera. So then I went back to school and I studied counseling psychology, and you know, Ed says to use some of the things that you learned during sports. That's exactly what I did in psychology, and I started studying the athlete's mind and the self-study of my own mind. So, but sometimes it takes a while. You know, it takes a while to get that strong calling. So if you look at transition models, they'll talk about, I think it's William Bridges, who's a really good writer on the transition. He talks about the neutral zone, that there's a time that maybe you step away from the sport and you would like to be motivated and like to be on fire. And as Joseph Campbell says, you would like to follow your bliss, but you don't know what your bliss is. And so sometimes you just have to jump into something, whatever it is, and then just see what you like about it. And in the career studies and career support, they call that lateral moves. You know, so, you know, one example is somebody starts working on computers, but it doesn't really satisfy their creativity, so they start doing artistic design on computers. Sometimes you have to do like me and leap completely from one element to another. So from being a professional photographer to basically being a counselor in psychology. But you have to give yourself a break and just kind of get out there and try different things until something starts to light your fire. And to me, it's really, really hard. And I wish there were more programs for athletes that could walk you through it. But as far as I know, that they're not. I think the NFL is starting to do a better job. When I was studying the transition about 20 years ago, the NFL didn't want to hear about it at all. And actually the public didn't want to hear about it at all. They were like, well, you guys had your time and your chance.
Yeah.
And if you didn't make it, you know, shame on you. Well, you know, we sit there, we come off of the mountain and we sit in that neutral zone, and it just takes a while. It takes a while to find it. Unless you're lucky. There are a few guys that find it right away, but very few. I'd say a very, very small percentage. But great question.
Thanks, guys.
Yep.
I think we have about 4 or 5 minutes left. If anybody else has anything. So I see somebody maybe trying to speak, but they're on mute.
Yeah, I just unmuted myself. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Ben.
Yep.
I was just curious if you don't mind kind of reviewing the acronym CHAMP and mentioning the context of it.
Okay, so what I did was I took the hero's journey and I simplified it into an athlete's journey, which you saw on the screen. And then I even simplified it more, and I took some of the elements off of both of those journeys, the hero's journey and the athlete's journey, and just put them in a form that allows people to focus on some of the major elements. And so I just developed the acronym CHAMP, and the C can be your call to adventure, as they say in literature, your call to excellence as an athlete, or your challenge. The H relates to the hero's journey because it's hurdles, and your hurdles are actually also your fears. So in the hero's journey, right after you get the calling, if it's a strong calling, a big calling, and something that takes a lot of energy to actually be successful, you have to go through something. So that there's fears. There's the fear of the call. So for me in football, it was those big guys that look like Ed White out there. How am I going to hit him in the jaw or try to get around him? Then the A is more for athletes than it is for because in sports, I think a really strong part of sports to be a great athlete, you need to visualize. And it's to me, the visualization of achievement is the motivating factor. So when I worked out before the season, I would run in the desert out here in 100 degrees, run telephone pole to telephone pole. And I tell myself I'm gonna run 5 telephone poles at 90%. And I get to the 5th pole and I go, I can run 3 more at 90%. And as I was running, sometimes I could literally of the Cleveland Browns in my ears when I was alone in the desert, because I was visualizing myself being in the kind of shape to make that sack on 3rd or 4th down. And then M is for mentors, which is in both the hero's journey, and I put it into champ because it's so important. And the mentors can be either a person. It's probably best if it's a person, but it can be a book, it can be a movie, anything instructional. Part of the word mentor is from the word for mental in probably Greek or Latin, which is mind. So a mentor helps the mentee make up their mind and their worldview. And then the P is just kind of like looking at all of this, the plan. What are the 1, 2, 3, 4 things that you're going to do? And then to me, always it's best to put like a time frame on it. Choose one of those things, put a time frame on it. Again, I actually have instructions as if you were instructing a group of young men and or women athletes on how to do this. So if you email me and put champ goal setting model, I'll send it to you and feel free to use it.
I appreciate that. Thank you. It sounds like on the plan, you're really setting us SMART goals, like specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound.
And actually, to me, the plan is actually the action steps. And I've looked at SMART goals, and I think that they're very helpful. The one thing about SMART goals, to me, is that it's evaluating whether your goal is the right goal or not. But it's not taking you through the steps, as far as I can see, of how to get to the goal. This one, you're actually then creating some action steps. SMART goals just says, is it the right goal? Which is good. You can do a SMART goal to get your goal in another, sort of goal setting model or form.
I follow you. Okay, thank you.
You bet. I think we're at the top of the hour, and I know that I think they have another webinar. So Ed and I thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
For the technical problems, but it's been fun looking up Ed's nose.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks, very much.
Thank you.
Please get in touch if you want any more information.
Okay,
Hey,
thank you.
Ed, Don.